You ever get frustrated when something is so close to amazing, but then something else holds it back and it becomes wasted potential? When Supersonic first appeared in Sonic 2, it was a really cool mechanic. Get all the Chaos Emeralds and 50 rings, and Sonic becomes a Shonen Jump lawsuit. He's completely invincible and much faster. And Sonic 3, you get a full-on boss fight in space, and while the mechanics are limited to just a dash attack, it was cool for the time, and still cool to an extent nowadays too. The simple mechanic also made sense, since it didn't need to be more complicated than that. When Sonic made the jump to 3D, so did Supersonic, and even though all you could do was dash, it was the first attempt at 3D, so keeping it simple made sense, and Supersonic was still cool. However, as the game releases went on, I personally think that Supersonic became less and less special. He appeared in every main game, and all you ever really do is ram Sonic's face into the boss over and over. It didn't really feel super, and the bosses would definitely range in quality. It just felt formulaic and boring after a certain point. We did eventually get a playable Supersonic in normal levels for 3D games, and when it happened, it was cool, but still felt underutilized. Sometimes Sonic would get other forms, and that mix-up would definitely help these super forms to feel special and unique again, like Hypersonic, Dark Spine Sonic, and Excalibur Sonic. It just felt like Supersonic no longer felt important or super to me. It's a golden form with one attack, and you see it almost every game. Even when the games de-emphasized it, I didn't really care that we saw less of him. With the announcement that Supersonic will return for Sonic Frontiers, and how Frontiers is going to go in a different direction, I still wasn't excited. But that's because I was cautious for the entirety of the game's lead up to release, and only changed my thoughts after release. Anyway, I do have mixed feelings on the game as a whole, but that's not what this video is about. Well, it kind of is too. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me do some proper lead-in. Oh, and spoilers for Frontiers. Frontiers itself is different from most Sonic games, in that the playable area is much more open than most Sonic levels. Although that comes with some issues, mainly odd controls once in a while, and the camera still isn't great. Regardless, this game also differentiates itself from previous Sonic games in two more main ways. The music is way more reserved and more in the background, and there's actual combat. Some Sonic games have had some form of combat that is more than just a homing attack, but in this game you actually have special moves, and can link them into one another in a way that's like combos, even if they aren't in the traditional sense. So you go through the game and are being teased the idea of playing Supersonic throughout the game, and not just at the end, which is already an exciting idea, but then you actually confront the first boss. So you get to it and run around in the shadow of this Colossus, and once you get to its head, you get the last emerald. Okay, time for ramming Sonic's head into it over and over, and... Are those vocals? What the hell? This song is awesome! Wait, this game is combat. Will that translate to clone projections come out every time I hit it? Fuck yeah! This is why I've been looking forward to Supersonic for a long time. Let's break this down. Just in a general sense, this is a cool idea. Not only do we get to play Supersonic multiple times throughout the game and not just the final boss, but we get an injection of Metal Gear Rising by having a hype song accompany the boss fight. Again, something safe for the final boss usually. Regardless of how you feel about the bosses or the game overall, the soundtrack for these bosses are fantastic and really elevate these fights than if there was no music or more somber music. The best aspect of these bosses is that your combat carries over into these fights. Instead of the average faceplant I've been mentioning, Supersonic's combat is the same as Sonic's, so you can actually fight the bosses with actual combat, and it is awesome. You actually need to dodge attacks and figure out patterns and punch accordingly instead of a basic dodge around simple attacks or just bum rushing it. What also makes the bosses awesome is the set pieces in them. Yeah, QTEs are a dumb way to interact with the game if not incorporated correctly, and set pieces are all scripted mid-fight cutscenes, but god damn, these mid-fight cutscenes are so cool! Sonic's never really had this, or if they did it, it was never this over the top, so seeing this happen not only shows how powerful both the Titans and Supersonic are, but are also just cool moments on their own. And it gets better as the game goes on too. Not only does each boss have their own unique mechanics, but unique song and unique counter-attack animation. If you parry some bosses, you'll get a cool movie of Sonic and a ton of after images attack the boss, but two in particular have completely unique animations, and they are amazing. Special mention goes to the counterattack against Wyvern, as Sonic tosses that fucker into a mountain. This is what Super Sonic was missing to truly make it feel special and, well, super. We need more games in the future that evolve on this concept. That being said, while this is the best Super Sonic has been to me in a long time, you saw the title of the video, right? There are some problems still holding it back from being perfect. In overall sense, the concept of these fights are awesome, but the execution is mixed. Frontiers on the whole has a lot of jank to it, whether it comes to animations, combat, camera, obstacle design, etc. And unfortunately that does carry over to the Supersonic boss fights. Combat on its own looks awkward and is very unclear when you can attack the boss. A lot of animations just skip or don't really finish. It also doesn't help that when Sonic gets hit, the camera faces him and you can't change it until he flies back in. While the camera is still facing you, you can get hit again without even seeing it. Why the camera just can't spin while he flies back, I don't know. Thankfully, most of the boss attacks are clear when they will attack, so no real jank there. Also, to me personally, I wish there was a move that was exclusive to Super Sonic to make him feel more unique. Besides the base attacks and counters, all of your attacks are just Sonic's regular attacks, but gold. Now, from a game design standpoint, this makes sense to do, but it doesn't make you feel like Super Sonic and just OC Do Not Steal. I think having one exclusive Super Sonic move that feels and looks awesome could have helped, and since it's only one attack, you don't have to worry about adjusting to a completely new moveset each time you fight a boss. I wouldn't really say that this is an issue with the game, but I would have liked to see it. What is an issue is that no matter the difficulty, every boss is easy. Well, except the secret boss, but I'll get into that a bit later. It's easy due to two factors. 1. Since Super Sonic can't take actual damage, each boss is more of a timed battle than a battle of attrition with both fighters having health bars. As long as you have a high ring count and don't waste your time, you don't have to worry about losing once. Even if you do lose all your rings and have to start over, it doesn't really take long to get back to wherever you were at. Even if you are in hard mode, majority of the bosses are not difficult and can't be because you don't lose health anyway. 2. The parry is busted. The parry is the easiest parry in any game I've ever played that has a parry in it, and it trivializes almost every physical challenge in this game. All you have to do is hold the required buttons down and Sonic will parry at any point. In most games, that would be called a block, with the parry being a more well-timed block in conjunction to an enemy attack, but here you can parry at any point and parry almost anything. In fact, some bosses require parries to beat it. In a general sense, this isn't bad, but in execution, this makes everything a non-issue. Just parry every attack and you'll be fine. In some cases, like I mentioned earlier, you'll get cool cutscenes if you also counterattack, but otherwise it trivializes any and all challenge. So with the combination of a broken defense mechanic and not having to worry about taking damage and only having to worry about a time limit of sorts, the bosses lose their luster since they're not challenging at all. I feel like if these enemies were so hard that Super Sonic might have a tough time beating them, this could be the first game where Super Sonic can actually take damage, which would make it so much more challenging. Also, the best moments in the boss fights aren't you just fighting the bosses directly, it's the cutscenes. Like I mentioned earlier, the scripted moments are awesome, but that's scripted moments, not truly in-game moments that you yourself did. Granted, at least for counterattack animations, you need a specific upgrade and to parry at the right time to trigger certain scripted moments, and you can absolutely miss them, so that helps mitigate things a bit. It sucks that you can't just do these cool things through experimentation, but just have to wait for the cool moment to happen. These boss fights get compared to Metal Gear Rising, and using that as an example, they do have cool moments stuck to QuickTime events, but because the base combat and enemy movesets are so cool on their own, you can have cool moments outside of scripted sections, whereas this game you can only do that with one move sometimes and maybe. And the worst part of this whole Supersonic thing I'm talking about is the final boss and secret boss. The first 3 bosses are great in their own ways despite the negatives I presented, but the last 1 to 2 just suck. Supreme is just a slight variation of the first boss. Sure, Supreme has its own scripted events and bullet hell-esque gimmick, but its design and attacks are identical to Giganto. Giganto, Giant Man. It doesn't really take advantage of the things the scripted moments set up, like laser wings and a big ass rifle. Also, its counters don't seem to work correctly. It's not horrible, but this is the last Titan boss, and it plays and is as challenging as the first boss of the game. The first boss is allowed to be easy. It's the intro boss meant to introduce things early in the game. This shouldn't be as easy. If you finish the game on easy or normal, you also miss out on a whole boss fight. On hard, you actually get to fight it, and it's lackluster, which is ironic given how it's the first boss to be a real challenge since it is hard and you can die pretty easily. So the game makes it seem like you're going to have some big and awesome supersonic fight in space, only to turn into Ikaruga Light. This is not great. Okay, as a bullet hell on its own, it's actually good. I might not like bullet hells much, but it felt fair and proper difficult, and complete on its own, it is well done. But as not only a final boss to a Sonic game and the final boss to a platformer, using a mechanic that has only appeared a couple of times as the final mechanic in the game is sloppy and stupid to do. Also, it's not even that difficult. I don't play bullet hells much, and it only took me 3 or 4 tries to beat. Also, given the existentialism and music style of the final boss, it felt like they were trying to do something similar to the final gameplay section of Nier Automata, without realizing why that version worked so much better. I don't know if there was supposed to be a real fight that got scrapped and rushed due to time constraints, but this could have been the best thing in the game if done right, and instead, it was not great. You don't even need to change much. The setting, mechanics, and music can all stay, but just give us Supersonic and not a ship to play as. Overall, Frontiers' boss fights are a great step forward for playable Supersonic, and I love them in a general sense, but some factors keep it from being as amazing as it should have been. The high points are really high, and the low points are there and does not override the high points, but the low points are enough to be noticeable and a bit of a problem. Also, no unlockable Supersonic in the overworld post-game. 0 out of 10. Give me another storybook series game. But in this game, you actually have special moves and can link them into one another in a way that's like combos, even if they aren't in the... Oh my god. Why am I messing up so much on this fucking script? Why am I stuttering and so much? Jesus fucking Christ. Ah! What also makes the bosses awesome is the set pieces for them. Oh, set pieces in them. Damn it. Gun jumping.